Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Lipovic. I am the program manager at Esri for GIS and Public Policy. I'm joined today by Bonnie Stayer, solution engineer on our team. Today we launch Esri's first webinar series for congressional staffers with an introduction to digital mapping and GIS for Congress. A few logistical notes. If you have questions throughout the session, there's a box that you can type in your questions, and I will moderate them throughout today's webinar. So with that, I will turn it over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Lauren. So as Lauren said, my name is Bonnie Stayer, and this is the Introduction to Digital Mapping and GIS for Congress. So to start off with, Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, enables congressional staff to do a number of things. One of those things is understand constituent sentiment. Others include investigating policy issues, collaborating with other staff around maps, and communicating with the public or the press or your constituents using maps. So we'll dive into each one of these concepts in a little bit more detail. So to start, understanding constituent sentiment using GIS can help you answer some questions, things like where has a member hosted town halls in their state or district? What kind of coverage are you getting across your state or district in terms of interacting with your constituents? How does attendance at town halls vary across the state or district? So what kind of activity and response are you getting when you're hosting those town halls? One of the other really popular uses of GIS is to understand where constituent mail is coming from. So mapping usually by zip code, counts of correspondence or rates of correspondence. This can help you answer, what issues are important where in my state or district, so who across the state or district really cares about a particular issue. And also looking at the time element, what issues have been important here recently? Are they consistently important? Are people writing in about them all the time or just at certain times? In terms of investigating policy issues using GIS, really GIS can be used to map any type of data that has location information. So you can answer questions like where are resources, assets, incidents, or other types of phenomena across the nation. What is their distribution like? How are they clustered? How are they trending, etc. So again, any type of location information can be captured within the GIS. And then you can ask, how do these things intersect with proposed policy? So an example here might be if there's proposed wind farms to be developed, how do those wind farms intersect with bird habitat, for example? So being able to overlay those layers within the GIS helps give you insights into these policy issues. And then another interesting thing that you can ask is how do these things intersect with committee members, states, or districts? So within the committee that's debating a certain policy, how do they connect, or how do they overlap with the members, states, or district? Which members really do have a stake in this debate, and how is it going to impact their constituency? So the third way is collaborating with other staff. So we can use the concept of groups within the GIS to share maps and mapping applications either with member office staff, committee staff, caucus staff, any of the groups that you naturally interact with in your role on Capitol Hill. So we can use groups to help share information confidentially with those other staff without having to make it publicly accessible. And then one of the other interesting ways that you can use groups is to connect your office to authoritative state resources. So a lot of states, either in the governor's office or other executive level offices, have their own GIS and they're providing authoritative GIS data within that office. And so again, we can use groups to connect a member office to your state counterpart to help leverage the information coming from those offices. And again, that can be done privately without the need to make everything public. So then the final way that you can use GIS is to communicate with the public. So lots of times members will want to share information on their websites and social media. So we'll see some examples of sharing stories about where the member has been, if they've been, participating in town halls or touring around businesses. You can use maps to help explain why legislation is needed or how it impacts the state or district to help your constituents understand why a member is taking a certain stance on an issue. We can embed maps directly into a website or press releases so that the maps are there where they're already consuming information. They don't have to go out to a separate site. And maps can also really help drive page views and social media interaction, since humans are inherently visual and we respond much better to maps than to tables of information. It can help drive that interaction with your site and your social media accounts. So now I'd like to take a look at some examples of what existing member offices and committee offices are already doing with GIS. So there's a lot of publicly accessible examples out there, and we'll take a look at just a few of them. So this example is from Congressman Lou Barletta from Pennsylvania's 11th District. And this is a very basic example of simply mapping some locations of district offices and other offices where they hold outreach hours across their district. So they wanted to just simply show their constituents where they can go to reach out for help, constituent services, etc. So it's an interactive map that's built right into their website. On this page, they can click and see the address, the location, phone number, and the office hours as well. So this is a really basic example where you can actually build this type of map just by collecting these addresses into a spreadsheet and just dragging and dropping them onto the map and then adding the district boundary if you would like. So this type of workflow could be used for things like this, district offices. It might be constituent services like tax preparation locations. Tax season's on us now. We've seen it used for that type of workflow as well. So another example, going beyond just a single map, this is from Senator James Risch of Idaho. He's actually embedded an entire gallery of maps onto his page. So as the constituents are browsing his site, if they go to the Idaho section and go to the map gallery section, they're brought here and they can see a collection of maps with information focused on the state of Idaho around issues that are important to the senator and to his constituents. So one of the ones that's very popular is to look at the active wildfires map. Now it's not wildfire season right now, so fortunately we're not seeing any fires within the state of Idaho. But during the summer months when it's wildfire season, we'll see these little flame icons and fire boundaries showing up within the state. So his constituents can easily come here and see that authoritative information. And this is actually leveraging data coming directly from the USGS. So as soon as they update the information about these wildfires, it's immediately made available to anyone accessing this, this page. So they can click and see the latest information about where fires are burning, is it burning near me, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a great example of leveraging authoritative content within the GIS to share with your constituents and make them aware of these issues. Another example is from Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon. This is an example of leveraging a map to help explain a policy stance. So back when Senator Wyden introduced the Better Care, Lower Cost Act, his team wanted to publicize that on his website. So under their priorities list, this became a new web page. So there's a description of what the background is of this piece of legislation and why the senator thought it was needed, basically wanting to standardize the delivery models of care for Medicare patients across the country. So to help support this stance, they included, again, an interactive map of these different Medicare beneficiaries with chronic conditions, statistics by county across the country. So there's actually 3 tabs in here. We can look at heart disease, diabetes, and COPD. And we obviously see how these rates vary across the country, some areas in green, some areas in red. So this helps illustrate that people are not necessarily receiving the same care across the country. So many offices have seen this and understand that using these types of visuals can help shame other members into supporting your legislation is one way that we've heard it put. So this is actually a web application that has been built directly into this site, embedded directly into this site. So it doesn't have to be just a single map. The next example, this is also from Senator Wyden along with Senator Grassley as members of the Senate Finance Committee. They did an investigation into the hepatitis C drug Sovaldi. So as part of a larger report on this investigation, they included this map, this application, that lets you swipe between two different layers of information. So as I drag this bar across the screen, we swipe between the red map and the blue map. And what this map is comparing in red is the percentage of hepatitis C patients who received the Sovaldi drug. So I'll call attention to the darker states where the percentage was very low. There were not a lot of patients receiving this drug. And on the blue side, this map shows the rank of Sovaldi in terms of the state spending. So darker colors mean the state was spending more on that drug. So they wanted to compare and see were there states where there was a lot of spending but not a lot of people receiving the drug. That can cause, some concerns, some suspicions. So Oregon is a good example of that. They have, only 1.3% of the patients received the drug, yet it ranked number 2 in the state spending. So it's understandable why Senator Wyden was interested in doing this investigation. So again, this is a, use of a committee to help the constituents understand why they were performing this investigation. Another example from a committee is from the House Committee on Natural Resources. The majority side wanted to put together a federal footprint map to be able to show all of the federally owned and managed lands across the country. So this map is a compilation of many different layers. We'll take a look at the details here. We'll get the legend so we can see all of the major landowning departments, critical habitat, wetlands, other types of protected areas. As well as some reference information including congressional districts and populated places. So as we zoom in, we can now dive in and look at maybe a particular city or particular district and see all of the lands that are either federally owned or federally managed or protected. So this was, an idea that they had to help other congresspeople, the general public, the media, to help them understand, just how much land is federally owned and managed, and therefore unavailable for things like private use and economic development. So it's been a very useful tool for them. They highlighted it at a speech at the Heritage Foundation, and it got a lot of interest from the press at that time. The next example, this is from Congressman Mark Takano from Southern California. And this is another one of the really popular workflows, which is creating what we call a map tour. So it shows a collection of photos and where those photos were taken. So in this case, a couple years ago, Congressman Takano did a tour of small businesses in his district. He did like 100 businesses over the August recess. So he was, putting together again a larger report about the challenges and benefits of doing business in that part of the country. But of course, everywhere he went, they were snapping photos. So his staff put together this map tour to let people, explore all these photos and see all the different places that he went to and covered during his tour. So this, interface is pretty simple to use. You've got a scrolling bar here on the bottom. There's a ribbon of photos that you can jump around to, or you can simply click a point on the map to navigate to that photo as well. And what's great about this is a template that's built into the GIS system, so it's very easy for you to simply point to a Flickr album and consume your photos into this template. And we'll show that workflow in a little bit. All right, the last example, this is actually one that isn't public, but we were given permission by Senator Risch's office to show it since it's a very popular workflow. And this is the concept of mapping constituent correspondence. So Senator Risch's team manages all their correspondence data in the IQ system, but we're not limited to that as long as you can export data from your content management system into an Excel file, we'll be able to map it. So they looked at a year's worth of data on correspondence on Second Amendment issues. So from about January 2012, February 2013 is the range of time that we're looking at. So they export that data into a spreadsheet that has the zip codes and then the counts of correspondence for each of those zip codes, and then we can easily map that. And because they had date information as well, the software understands those date fields and will present this to us with a time slider. So as I scroll through time, you'll see, at certain points we have low counts of correspondence, light colors, not a lot of people writing in, and then at some points we'll see it get darker. So this point here in the summertime, this corresponded to the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. And then after that incident, the rate goes back down again. And then as we get towards the end of the year, these darker colors are now arriving around the same time as the shooting in Sandy Hook Elementary. So they're able to see not just where this issue is important in space, but also in time. So they can kind of correlate the spike in correspondence to things in the national dialogue. So one thing to note, they are looking at raw counts of correspondence here, so we're naturally seeing higher correspondence from the major cities like Boise, Idaho Falls, and Coeur d'Alene up in the north. So what we can actually do is normalize this by population, kind of factor the population out to see, where is this issue really important and not just a reflection of the greater population in this area. And then, obviously they just did this for a single issue. We can map many issues for, as many issues as you're tracking. You could create a similar map and kind of put together a portfolio of, correspondence rates for each of those issues. So if the member is going back to their district or state and then, holding a town hall in a particular zip code, you're aware of which issues are most important there and what the members should be prepared to speak about. All right, so those are some of the existing examples. So now I'm going to jump into the actual GIS system and walk through how some of these examples were made.
Bonnie,
so here in my
before
browser,
you do,
oh, sure.
We have our first question.
Okay.
So someone would like to know if they can add points after creating a map, or how they would update that data in the last example you showed.
How they can add more, so if you have a wider range of time frame, for example, that you want to update your map with. Yeah, so in the software that we use to do this, if you just append more records to your spreadsheet, you can easily update the layer in your map from that. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the example using Excel, which will be our last example. But yes, you can certainly continue to update the map even once you've created it and shared it. Okay, so I'm going to jump over to the actual GIS system. So again, we're logged into the browser here into a site that we call SAMS. This is the Senate Analytical Mapping System, and there is a sort of sister site for the House called House Map. But just for today's demonstration, I'm going to work within SAMS. But the functionality is the same between both of those, so I won't be showing you anything here that you don't have access to on the House site as well. And this is really just a branded version of Esri's ArcGIS Online system. So you might see the term ArcGIS Online within the interface. So we just want to make you aware of that. That is the sort of generic name for this technology. And it's a cloud-based technology that many organizations across the federal government, state government, local government, and other types of entities are using to do the same type of geospatial work. So on the home page, there's some links that capture some of these workflows that we're going to talk about. There's some examples of other types of maps for different topics of interest to all the congressional offices. And then the real action happens in the mapping tab. So that's where we're going to go to first, is just to walk through how you might put together a map that either you want to share on your website, or you might just want to keep internal, but you want to leverage some existing content. You know, maybe it's a policy debate that's come up, or just some you know, topic of interest that you want to make your other colleagues aware of. So within our mapping interface, we're presented with a kind of default base map. So these base maps are used for context. We can easily change that if we don't want this topographic map. Maybe we want something a little simpler. I tend to like the dark gray or light gray canvas maps. So they're very neutral, and they let anything that you put on top of them stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to switch to this base map. So right now, under my content, that's all that I have here is my canvas base map. But there are many different ways to add content onto this map. The first way we're going to look at is simply by searching the online system. So we can search just within SAMS, just within the Senate, by leaving this as, you know, my organization. But there's a much wider repository of content out there if you change this drop-down to ArcGIS Online. So this lets you pull in the data coming from any of those authoritative federal agencies or state agencies that are sharing their data publicly within this system. So say I want to make a map of public lands, since it is a very popular topic. So we'll look up some information about that. Now I might know that the USGS has the gap analysis program, who maintain the protected areas database for the U.S. So I'm interested to see what the gap analysis program has shared here. So I'm going to look up their username, and I get a list of results that has, you know, land cover, easements, lands by agency, but the one I'll look at is the public access one. So if I just click that name, I can get a little bit more information about it, and I'll go ahead and add that to my map. So this will draw that layer for me. You can see obviously this is a nationwide layer. So I've added a layer on top of my base map, and now appears my content. So if this is a nationwide map that I'm interested in creating, I might leave it like this and save it, but maybe I want to highlight a particular state. Maybe it's my, you know, my state that I want to focus on. So obviously I can zoom in. I'm gonna pick on Colorado today, and we'll kind of zoom in here, and maybe I just want to, you know, kind of focus people's attention just on Colorado. So one of the things we can do is kind of add a mask to this map to help highlight the state that I'm interested in. So Esri has a set of maps called the Living Atlas. So these are things like boundary layers and other authoritative data that we're kind of curating and making available through this, through the Living Atlas. So I'm just going to search for states real quick. And we've got a state boundary file here. I'll add that. Now obviously it's covering up my public lands, but what I'll do is first filter it. So one of the things I can do to configure my layers is filter them. So I'll set up just a quick filter to only show, or to show everything except Colorado. So I'm going to kind of mask out everything else. And I don't really like this orange color, so I'm going to make that a little bit better by changing the style. And in the options for the style, I'm just going to update this to be kind of a semi-transparent gray. And I'll turn off that outline. So now my map has kind of focused my attention on Colorado, right? We can still see the data for the other states, but it's really bringing this into focus. So this might be the end result that I want. If this is the complete map that I want, the next step I'll do is to save it. So we want to preserve this combination of layers and the styling that we applied to it. So I'm just going to call it Colorado Public Access Lands. Put a tag in there. This gets saved into my content. So right now I'm the only person that can access this. If I log out and come back in the next day, I can go to my content, find it, open it, continue to edit it. But if I want to make it available to other users, if we want to collaborate around this, for example, I want to share it with other people, I use the share option. So first I choose kind of the scope of that sharing. Is it being shared with everyone, just the Senate, or a group? So based on your login, you'll see certain groups listed here. If you're from a member office, there'll be a group for that member. If you're from a committee, we'll have the appropriate committee group as well. I'm logged in as an admin right now, so that's why I'm seeing all of the groups. But I could choose just to share this map with my coworkers or my colleagues in a particular group. So if I choose to share this with perhaps, let's see, Corey Gardner from Colorado, then only other users who are members of that group will be able to access this map. So it's not publicly available. Then I can simply, send them a link to this, and they can open it, log in, and be able to see the same data that I'm looking at. One of the other ways to share is to create a web application. So if it is an app that I wanted to put, a header around, or maybe some other type of functionality like a address search or something like that, I can quickly put this map into one of these configurable application templates. We'll talk a little bit about this in the next example as well with the story maps, but there's many different templates here for different functionality, different layouts, depending on what you want. And you don't have to be a web developer in order to create these. You simply choose the template that you want and then put your map into it. So I can preview what this map looks like in one of these templates. So that's great that you have access to all of these, configurable application templates to really customize people's view of your maps. I'll close out of this. All right, so that was just a quick walkthrough of building a map from some existing information, some authoritative information that we just searched for within the GIS system. One of the other really popular workflows is, as I mentioned, building a map tour. So that photo tour, the photo ribbon showing where a member has been. And the easiest way to create one of those maps is by using the Story Maps website. So this is another URL to remember, is the storymaps.arcgis.com. You sign in with the same credentials that you use within SAMS or House Map. And then you can go to the app section to launch a builder for the map tour. There's other templates down here that we can bring up in another webinar, but today we're focusing on the map tour since it is the most popular one. And there's a simple builder that you can launch directly from this page. And first it's going to ask me, where are my photos? So this application is obviously very focused on the photos and the images, so it wants to know where they are. And again, the easiest pathway is to capture your photos with a GPS-enabled camera. So if you're using your smartphone, you would just turn on location services and make sure that your camera can access location, and then put those photos into a Flickr album. So Flickr is one of the services that we support here. So you can simply click the Flickr icon, type in your Flickr username. So this time I'm going to pick on Senator Wyden, since his office has done a number of these. I'll look up his username and his photo sets. So these are all his public photo sets. I'll use this one from the March map tour that they made a couple years ago. So I'll import those photos. And again, oh, sorry, Lauren, is there a question?
There is. We have our second question. Once you've finished demoing this, we're wondering how we can import, or if it's possible to import data that's not already in a Flickr album.
Yes, yeah. So if I go back, you'll see that there were other options here. We don't have time to cover it in today's webinar, but there's definitely other mechanisms for creating this if you're not using Flickr. Whether your images are stored on another web server somewhere or if they're sitting on your hard drive, we can still handle those cases. So in a future webinar, we can deep dive into those options. But for today, I'll stick with the Flickr option. March map tour. All right. So I import those photos. We can see 34 of the 36 have been located, so meaning they've been placed on the map where they were captured. However, there were 2 that were not. So for 2 of these photos, they didn't have their GPS on, so they didn't have that geotagged information. But we can easily add those to our map. If I want to zoom in and get really precise with this, I can, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to click kind of anywhere here and drop these onto the map. So now once all my photos are placed, I'll import them. And you can see this interface is pretty much built for us. So compared to the one we saw for Congressman Takano, it's pretty much done. So that's the beauty of using this application template. There's still some configuration that I can apply at this point. If I want to edit any of the text, so anywhere you see the little pencil icon, we can edit titles, captions, the title of the tour itself. So on Wyden's March tour, things like that. You can see we can change colors of the icons. So maybe if you want to categorize your points by something, you can change the colors around. You can select a point, change its color. We can organize our photos, so maybe the order you had them in the Flickr album isn't necessarily the order you want to present them in, so we can use this dialog to kind of move things around. If there's any that you want to hide, they may have been in Flickr, but you don't end up wanting to use them, you can hide a photo and apply those configurations. There's also some other settings we can tweak. So again, by default, we've got a kind of a gray header up here with the Esri logo, but in the settings we're able to configure things like the colors as well as the header logo image. Again, we won't get into that today, but know that those options are available to you, so you can kind of brand it for your own office's use. And again, once you've made the changes that you like, you're done configuring, you would save this, and if it is ultimately something that you're going to share publicly, we can go ahead and share. If you share publicly, then you can have you'll find some options to either just send people links to it, or using the story maps page again, we'll get some options for embedding it into a website, sharing it through social media, things like that. Again, we can cover those workflows in the deep dive webinar coming up in April. All right, and so the last example for today is the constituent correspondence. So again, this is, along with the map tour, probably the most popular workflow. So as I mentioned, as long as you can export data from your content management system as a spreadsheet, and you just isolate the zip codes, you might just have your list of zip codes and then the counts of information or counts of correspondence. Those might be the only 2 columns that you have, and that's fine. We can absolutely work with that. I've added in a couple extra columns here just to illustrate the concept of normalizing by population. So in a later session, the next webinar in March, we'll talk about how we add that population data in and calculate this rate. But it does help make for a slightly more informative and interesting map. But regardless of the data you've got here, it's a pretty easy process to map it. So there is a add-in for Microsoft Office, the ArcGIS Maps for Office. So it's a simple download you can get from our website. Once that's installed, you have a new tab in your Excel interface. You can sign in with the same credentials, again, that you use anywhere else with SAMS or House Map. And then you can simply add a map into your spreadsheet. So this map is going to kind of look at my table that I've got here. It understands that it's a table. It's got a column called zip, so it's made a best guess about the location type. So it's guessed that I want to map to zip codes, which is correct in this case. But just be aware, if you've got other types of data that you want to map in Excel, we can do, addresses, congressional districts, states, counties, countries, all of those types of information. Anything that has a location associated with it. And then it's asking me how I want to style my map. So do I want to have a dot over each zip code and change the size, or do I want to color code them? So I'm going to style it. We'll style it by the count to start with, and I'll do the shaded boundaries. Go ahead and add that data. And again, I'm picking on Idaho here. So this was zip codes in Idaho with a nondescript issue. So now we've got our zip codes color-coded based on the number of pieces of correspondence. So again, we can see how that varies across the state. There's some options here for changing the appearance of the map if we want to adjust the styling. If you want to classify your data, if you're a statistics nerd and you want to get real nerdy about quantile and equal interval and all that good stuff, you can. I'll leave it unclassified for a moment and just say OK. So now I've got this one layer in my map, and so maybe this is it. Again, if all you want to do is map those counts, that's great. If you do want to calculate a rate, once we add in the population, we have our rate column. Again, we can just change that style real quickly to show the rate instead, and I'll go back into the options. And again, if you want to adjust things, maybe I want to show I want to highlight everything that's above the average. So I want to bring this slider down to 10 or something like that. So it shows me those areas that really are, oh, I didn't grab that, that really are above the average, where people are really interested in this particular topic, whatever it is, right? So, it's not just a map of population, it's actually showing us true sentiment on this issue. So just like in the browser, we have access to different base maps. If I, again, wanted to change this base map, I could. And I could, do some further configuration on the layer, but ultimately, if I want to save this, I can save it right here within my spreadsheet. So when I open the spreadsheet again, it'll still be there. I could just simply create a snapshot of this map if I want to put it into a PDF or Word or something like that. But I can also share it as a live web layer within the SAMS or House Map system. So I can go ahead and share this, give it something meaningful. And again, choose who gets access to this. Most likely this would be something you keep internal to your office. So you choose to only share it with your particular group. But it becomes just like any other map that you would create within the browser. And is available to anyone with a login and access to your group to see and build other maps around or put into an application, for example. So again, there's a lot more we can go into here. I didn't cover the time aspect. We're saving that for the next webinar that we're going to be doing in March. We'll be a bit deeper dive on mapping this type of data and the types of products that you can create from it. So with that, I'm going to jump back into the slides. All right, so just to wrap up, the GIS technology that we walked through, provides you that sort of do-it-yourself mapping. Since it's browser-based and Excel-based, it's a more natural environment. You don't need any heavy desktop software to be able to do this type of mapping. You have access to authoritative content through ArcGIS Online. There are many configurable web applications for telling stories or simply, presenting information in a clean way that provides, mobile and web access for users, across your constituency to just look at these maps in a browser, on their mobile devices, through social media, etc. And again, just a reminder of those 4 key areas that GIS can help you with is understanding the constituent sentiment, policy issues, collaboration, and communication. So the next steps, if you're interested in what you saw here today, if you're with the House of Representatives, you can reach out to the CAO service desk at the number there. They can get you a login to House Map, and you'll be ready to go to start creating these types of maps. Same thing on the Senate side. If you email this, the Senate Sergeant at Arms at that address, they can get you a login to the SAMS account. So I mentioned a couple times the upcoming webinars. We have one scheduled March 22nd, and that'll be a deeper dive into mapping constituent correspondence. So we'll talk about those types of things like the time slider and all that good stuff. And then April 26th, we'll talk a little bit more about the story maps, the map tour, for example, and the different ways that you can put your photos into that map tour, on building story maps for public websites, press, and media. And the registration link is shown here. http://go.esri.com/policy-webinars. So with this, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them at this point, or if Lauren has any final comments, we'll be ready to wrap up.
We do not have any other questions in the queue, so we can unmute you if you would like to ask a question, or feel free to type it into the chat window. Okay, thank you everyone for your time. Feel free to register for the next email. If you have questions, you can email policy@esri.com, and we're happy to follow up with you in person. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.